GLC is now offering a free audio stream of our 24/7 broadcast that we're calling GLC Radio, an online radio station that broadcasts our round-the-clock audio stream on a variety of platforms. GLC Radio gives you the ability to listen to GLC virtually anywhere, through your home or office computer, or on the go with a mobile device. You can access GLC Radio through our website or by searching for God's Learning Channel through iTunes Internet Radio, TuneInRadio.com, or on Shoutcast.com. Explore various GLC Radio-enabled mobile apps by visiting our website at glc.us.com/listen/GLC Radio. GLC Radio, your free connection to GLC anywhere, anytime.
Well, praise God and welcome to the midweek update.
It is.
What's going on today in the world? Anything?
Well, Holocaust remembrance is going on in the world, for one thing, which is why this week on Light of the Southwest we're airing programs that are geared towards that with Holocaust survivors. Tonight's Light of the Southwest is a program with Jerry Morgan and Bill Womack. They were part of the liberation of the camps, and some fabulously wonderful gentlemen. They actually live in Midland, and anyway, it's a very good program. I saw, and I pulled the article but didn't have time to bring it, which is about the release of a movie on the Holocaust. And it's a subject that they've known about, but nobody wants to touch it.
Why?
Because it's about the sexual abuse of the children by the Nazis. And, you know, I thought, wait a minute. We've had a guest here on GLC, and his book is so hard to read because he was a victim of that, and that is Peter Loth. So, anyway, an ugly, ugly, ugly part of history. Just absolutely appalling. But anyway, they've actually interviewed survivors, and even in the article, they were not releasing the names of these people because they hadn't yet told their families. It's such a difficult thing for them, because children, when bad things happen to them, blame themselves. I deserve this. I don't know what I've done, but I deserve it, no matter what it is. It's like that video that hit the web last week with some man in a store literally punching a kid in the face. It was on the security video, and that little boy might have been 3 years old. His mother then came and took him by the hand and walked out of the store with him. And she was obviously very pregnant. And it was like she was not in a position to confront that father. So anyway, they nabbed the guy, but, you know, it's like...
Was it his father?
I have no idea.
Oh, okay.
Probably.
Okay, where do we want to go?
Well, you have a letter.
I got a letter. It's a good letter. Al, Tommy, and Amy, I have been watching your program on and off for years on Channel 12, Suddenlink here in Midland. Update News and Light of the Southwest are the programs I try not to miss. God bless and keep up the good work. Juanita from Midland. Thank you, Juanita.
Thank you, Juanita. It's encouraging.
It is.
Because especially this program is a very time-consuming program.
It is.
But you know what? Mom has a devotion, and then we got lots of news you're not going to get anywhere else.
Indeed. I have a wonderful devotion from Pastor Frangipane, and it's called A Thankful Heart. The very quality of your life, whether you love it or hate it, is based upon how thankful you are toward God. It is one's attitude that determines whether life unfolds into a place of blessedness or wretchedness. Indeed, looking at the same rose bush, some people complain that the roses have thorns, while others rejoice that some thorns come with roses. It all depends on your perspective. This is the only life you will have before you enter eternity. If you want to find joy, you must first find thankfulness. Indeed, the one who's thankful for even a little enjoys much, but the unappreciative soul is always miserable, always complaining. He lives outside the shelter of the Most High God. Perhaps the worst enemy we have is not the devil, but our own tongue. James tells us the tongue is set among our members as that which sets on fire the course of our life. And he goes on to say, this fire is ignited by hell. Consider this. With our own words, we can enter the spirit of heaven or the agonies of hell. It's hell with its punishments, torments, and misery that controls the life of the grumbler and complainer. Paul expands this thought in 1 Corinthians 10:10, where he reminds us of the Jews who grumbled and were destroyed by the destroyer. The fact is, every time we open up to grumbling and complaining, the quality of our life is reduced proportionately. A destroyer is bringing our life to ruin. People often ask me, what's the ruling demon over our church or city? They expect me to answer with an ancient Aramaic or Phoenician name of a fallen angel. What I usually tell them is a lot more practical. One of the most pervasive evil influences over our nation is ingratitude. Do not minimize the strength and cunning of this enemy. Paul said that the Jews who grumbled and complained during their difficult circumstances were destroyed by the destroyer. Who was this destroyer? If you insist on discerning an ancient world ruler, one of the most powerful spirits mentioned in the Bible is Abaddon, whose Greek name is Apollyon. It means destroyer, according to Revelation 9:11. Paul said the Jews were destroyed by this spirit. In other words, when we are complaining and unthankful, we open the door to the destroyer, Abaddon, the demon king over the abyss of hell. Paul wrote, be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and petition with gratitude, make your requests be known to God. Philippians 4:8. Thanksgiving shuts the door to the bottomless pit and opens the door into the presence of God. And that excerpt was adopted from the book The Shelter of the Most High by Francis Frangipane.
Very good.
You know, nobody really likes to be around somebody who grumbles and complains all the time, so why would God want to be?
Really?
It's like, really?
Can you imagine him having to listen to a whole earth filled with people grumbling and going, ooh.
In the pile that I call my desk, every once in a while I run across this little note. And I keep it in the pile for a reason. Because what it says is, the most important decision that you can make on a daily basis is your attitude.
It really is.
And it's usually when I'm reaching into the middle of that pile that I need to see that little note. So, okay, well, this first article we've got comes from The Atlantic Wire, and Reuters. Congress has won its right to have a say on the Obama administration's potential nuclear agreement with Iran. The White House on Tuesday said President Obama would sign compromise legislation, giving Congress the opportunity to review and potentially reject a final deal before any sanctions are waived. The move diffuses a standoff over the separation of powers that could have led Congress to override a presidential veto on foreign policy legislation for the first time in 3 decades.
The legislation was passed unanimously, with strong bipartisan support by the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and is expected to pass the full Senate and then the House of Representatives. Revisions to the original bill helped solidify Democratic support in the face of a veto threat from the White House. The revised legislation does nothing to diminish the Republican opposition to Obama's framework agreement with Iran, but even Democrats said the main issue was whether the administration could cut Congress out entirely on such an important international accord. The committee approved the new proposal after Republicans on the panel held off on offering amendments that Democrats vowed to oppose, which included language that would have forced Iran to recognize Israel's right to exist.
The approved legislation cut to 30 days from 60, the time in which Congress can review any final nuclear agreement. It also eliminated the requirement that Obama certify that Iran is not supporting acts of terrorism against the United States. Instead, it requires the administration to send Congress regular, detailed reports on a range of issues, including Iran's support of terrorism, ballistic missiles, and nuclear program.
The bill also requires the Obama administration to send the text of the final agreement to Congress as soon as it is completed, and blocks Obama's ability to waive many U.S. sanctions on Iran while Congress reviews the deal. Congress will also have to vote to permanently lift the sanctions once the administration certifies that Iran is complying with the agreement to limit its nuclear activities. United Nations sanctions and those imposed by other countries could still be lifted if an agreement is reached on restricting Iran's nuclear program by a June 30 target date.
Josh Earnest, the White House press secretary, told reporters that while Obama was, quote, not particularly thrilled with the legislation, but that it had undergone substantial revision such that it's now in the form of a compromise that the president is willing to sign. In other words, the White House is relenting because after years of skirmishing over the limits of executive power, Congress has finally forced the president's hand. With congressional Democrats supporting the Senate plan, Obama faced the prospect of an embarrassing veto fight that itself could have scuttled the negotiations with Iran.
The prospect of Congress delaying sanctions relief or rejecting it altogether would add to concerns in Iran, whose supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has demanded that sanctions be lifted immediately after a deal is signed. European officials have said that worries about a possible spoiler role for Congress have undermined the U.S. delegation's credibility in the talks and raised questions about the Obama administration's ability to deliver on commitments.
Which makes one wonder what commitments.
Yeah.
In forcing its way into the Iran debate, Congress has succeeded where more partisan efforts to restrain the White House have failed in recent years, most notably on immigration. Yet because of the way the Corker bill is written, it will be much harder for lawmakers to actually reject an Iran deal than it was for them to guarantee their opportunity to do so. Maintaining that consensus once the administration returns with a final agreement will be a much taller task.
Russia on Monday introduced a new wrinkle into the convoluted international wrangling around the nuclear talks by lifting a self-imposed ban on delivering its S-300 missile defense system to Tehran. The move did not formally violate international sanctions, and the U.S. State Department said the administration did not believe it would disrupt the unity at the talks. But Secretary of State John Kerry raised concerns with Moscow.
Okay, the balance of our news is going to shift over to Israel and some things that have been happening over there. Very interesting. On Wednesday, and this comes from the Jerusalem Post, on Wednesday, the Nazareth District Court issued the first conviction of an Israeli Arab, Hamza Magamesh, for involvement with the Islamic State. The Shin Bet reported in November that Magamesh, 23, left for Turkey on October 5th, along with 3 friends from his village of Yafia, adjacent to Nazareth in the Galilee. He, along with 2 of those friends, continued to Syria in order to join the Islamic State. The 3 men were then taken to the Al-Madafa training camp about 90 minutes away.
The training was supposed to consist of 15 days studying Sharia law mixed with military training and then 30 days of harder military training. During his time with Islamic State, Magamesh was given the name Abu Amara al-Falastini. Magamesh, who spent 10 days at the training camp before sneaking out without notifying his IS commander, decided to return to Israel by way of Turkey. He was arrested upon landing at Ben Gurion Airport on October 24th. The Shin Bet did not comment on the whereabouts of his friends who traveled to Syria with him.
Well, in an unusual procedural situation, Magamse was convicted in March without fanfare of the minor charges against him for membership in a banned organization, conspiracy to commit a crime, and illegally leaving the country. However, Israel's attention was focused on Wednesday's decision because it was the first time an Israeli Arab was convicted of contact with an enemy agent where that agent was the Islamic State.
The three-judge panel emphasized in particular the massive dangers that the phenomenon of Israeli Arabs volunteering for IS could have for the country, both in terms of being turned into attackers with full access to the country and in terms of providing dangerous intelligence about Israel to the Islamic State. Magamse's sentencing hearing is set for June 14.
Several Israeli Muslims have been arrested after returning from Syria, where they joined Islamic State or other rebel groups. Most, like Magamse, were only in the country for a short time and did not see combat. One man, though, Ahmed Sherbaji, a 23-year-old from El-Fam, was charged in November 2014 with spending 3 months fighting with the Islamic State in Syria, during which he attended a training camp, took part in 2 gun battles, manned a checkpoint, and took part in patrols against Syrian state forces.
Well, this next article comes from the Jerusalem Post. The decision by the Coordinator of Government Activities in the Territories, COGAT, to allow Palestinian doctors to enter Israel with their vehicles has left some Palestinians wondering whether Israel and the Palestinian Authority are maintaining secret back-channel talks. The latest COGAT decision regarding Palestinian vehicles follows a series of steps Israel has taken since its March 17 elections. These steps stand in sharp contrast to reports about growing tensions between Israel and the PA, especially in the wake of the Palestinian decision to join the International Criminal Court and threats to suspend security coordination between the two sides.
Israel's first gesture came even before the election, when Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon ordered water to be hooked up to the new Palestinian city of Rawabi. 1 week after the election, in yet another surprise move, Israel decided to release frozen tax revenues belonging to the Palestinians. And in an even more surprising step, Palestinians living in towns surrounding Jerusalem woke up last week to discover that Palestinian policemen had been deployed in their communities.
For the first time since the signing of the Oslo Accords more than 20 years ago, Israel allowed armed and uniformed Palestinian policemen to operate in Iram, Abu Dis, Ezariah, and Bido. A spokesman for the Palestinian police told AFP that the deployment was the result of coordination with the Israeli authorities. Ironically, the deployment of Palestinian policemen in the towns surrounding came days after the PLO recommended that the Palestinian leadership suspend security coordination with Israel. The PLO, however, does not have the power to halt such coordination, and its decision, which was announced in Ramallah following a meeting led by PA President Mahmoud Abbas, is nothing but a recommendation.
Palestinian sources say that despite repeated threats by Abbas and other Palestinian leaders, security coordination with Israel continues as usual. This coordination, according to the sources, includes intelligence sharing and dealing with daily issues concerning Israelis and Palestinians in the West Bank. The ongoing security coordination is mainly directed against Hamas and other radical groups that pose a threat not only to Israel, but also to the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. The PA leaders in Ramallah are well aware that without help from Israel, they would face another Hamas coup like the one that took place in the Gaza Strip in the summer of 2007.
Today, the number of Hamas operatives and supporters whom PA security forces arrest in the West Bank is larger than the number of Israel targets. Hardly a day passes without reports about several Hamas supporters being arrested or summoned for interrogation by various branches of the PA security force in the West Bank. And while the rhetoric of most Palestinian officials towards Israel remains inflammatory, there's a feeling among some Palestinians that matters between the two sides are not as bad as they may seem to be. Many are convinced that Israel and the PA leadership maintain a form of secret back-channel dialogue that allows the two parties to continue working together despite apparent tensions between them.
Some have even gone as far as arguing that the recent Israeli gestures are part of a deal to stop the Palestinians from filing war crime charges against Israel at the International Criminal Court. Other Palestinians attribute the gestures to a strong desire on the part of the PA leadership to avoid an all-out confrontation with Israel on both the diplomatic and security levels. At the same time, Israel has an interest in preventing the collapse of the PA in the West Bank, a situation that would result in total anarchy and lawlessness and pave the way for yet another intifada. So isn't that very interesting?
It is very interesting.
Have you been hearing anything
No.
on the
Not
news
a word.
about the things that Israel's doing for the Palestinians?
No.
No. Okay, well, here's another article from it's a combination of two articles actually from the Jerusalem Post. The Shin Bet, Israel's security agency, announced on Tuesday that security forces uncovered a Hamas cell that planned to carry out a shooting attack against military forces this past Purim. The cell's members, who came from the town of Abu Dis, east of Jerusalem, we heard about that town in the last article, purchased a vehicle and underwent firearms training while also gathering intelligence on targets. They were arrested before they were able to carry out the attack. We have seized firearms in the course of the investigation, the security agency stated.
One of the suspects arrested is Ma'an Sa'ar, the alleged head of the cell. Sa'ar, from the northern West Bank village of Burqa, worked at the Abu Dis University cafeteria. A Hamas member, he served a prison sentence from 2009 to 2011 for his involvement in a shooting attack on the IDF. A second Hamas suspect, Duad Adwan of Azariah, also served time in prison in the past and had expertise in handgun use, the Shin Bet said.
We also heard about that town in the last article. According to the agency, the cell was in a highly advanced stage of planning. Its members practiced firing with a Kalashnikov and a 9mm handgun and had rented a vehicle, which it planned to burn in a forest after the attack, the Shin Bet said. The suspects will be charged at the Judea Military Court in the coming days. The investigation underlines the high motivation by Hamas to carry out attacks in Jerusalem and its environment, and the danger posed by Hamas members who return to the cycle of terrorism after being released from prison, the security agency said.
In related news, just one day after the Shin Bet announced that security forces had uncovered the Hamas cell, security forces arrested 29 Hamas members in the Nablus area of the West Bank. The raids, which took place overnight between Tuesday and Wednesday, were carried out jointly by the Shin Bet, IDF, and Israel police. They targeted, among others, senior Hamas members and former prisoners who again became active in Hamas following their release from prison. Security forces said the arrest came in response to a rise in Hamas activity in Nablus, which focused around the goal of trying to carry out terror attacks against Israel. The suspects were funded and orchestrated by a Hamas overseas headquarters, the Shin Bet said. Now, I wonder where that would be.
Overseas. Well, apparently they have some concerns up on the northern border of Israel with Lebanon, because that's where Hezbollah is.
Yep.
Primarily. Hezbollah, as we all know, is backed by Iran. Quite the little terrorist group. The Times of Israel bring us this information. The IDF has begun erecting a dirt berm along Israel's border with Lebanon to obstruct potential attacks by the Shiite terror group Hezbollah. The 7-mile earth barrier is being constructed on a cliff in the northwestern Galilee to prevent the infiltration of Hezbollah terrorists into Israeli communities situated along the border, Channel 2 News reported on Tuesday. The barrier is expected to be extended in the future, according to the report.
Colonel Alon Mednis, commander of the Baram Brigade, which guards the western part of Israel's northern border, told the TV station, "We're executing a significant engineering endeavor, creating obstacles in the terrain so as to use it for our defense. If and when the enemy decides to attack, it will need to confront not only us, but also the terrain." The IDF did not immediately comment on the report when contacted by the Times of Israel.
Israeli fears of Hezbollah's long-range missile capabilities have lately been compounded by angst over possible land invasions. Hezbollah has also managed a number of cross-border attacks in recent years. In January, 2 soldiers were killed when anti-tank missiles hit their vehicles traveling near the border. In October of 2000, the terror group attacked an Israeli patrol near Mount Dov on the Mount Hermon range, killing 3 IDF soldiers and wounding 7 others. The bodies of the soldiers that were killed were abducted into Lebanon. A similar attack near Moshav Sarit in July 2006, in which IDF reservist Ehud Goldwasser and Eldad Regev were killed and their bodies abducted, led Israel to launch the Second Lebanon War. That attack coincided with the kidnapping of IDF soldier Gilad Shalit by Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Shalit was held captive in the Gaza Strip for more than 5 years.
Yep.
So enough about that. We're going to end on a happy note today. This article comes from the AFP. Berlin, not Israel. A 65-year-old Berlin woman who already has 13 children is pregnant again with quadruplets. Germany's RTL broadcaster reported Sunday. The Russian and English teacher's pregnancy follows several attempts abroad at artificial insemination over the last year and a half, according to the private TV channel. The woman, Annegret Ranig, decided to try to have another child because her youngest daughter, who is 9, wanted a little brother or sister, the channel said on its website.
The channel said it would broadcast an interview with the expectant mother, who has 7 grandchildren, on Monday evening and planned to track her through the pregnancy and afterwards. It said the pregnancy had so far been without any major complications, and that if everything went well, the babies were due in the summer, and that Ron Eek would be the world's oldest mother of quadruplets.
A mass circulation newspaper reported the 4-baby pregnancy on its front page, quoting the prospective mother of 17, whose oldest daughter is reportedly 44, recalling the moment doctors broke the news. "Certainly that was a shock for me. On the scan, it was just clear to see," she was quoted as saying, adding, however, she had not considered it an option to reduce the number of embryos. Bless her heart.
Really? At a time when other women her age are preparing to slow down and take things easier, Ranig indicated she had no reservations about the challenges ahead. "I'm not actually afraid. I simply assume I'll remain healthy and fit," she said. Asked about moral doubts, RTL quoted her as asking, How does one have to be at 65? One must apparently always fit some cliche, which I find rather tiring. I think one must decide that for oneself.
Great story, huh? And you thought you had it rough.
They didn't mention the father in that whole thing.
Well, I'm sure there is one.
There's a father.
Okay, we'll see you guys on Friday. God bless you. Thanks for tuning in.
Be thankful.